The upcoming 11.5 changes have just been released, and we're ready to speedrun you through them so you're all up to date. Many will be glad to hear both Seraphine and Udyr are receiving nerfs, whereas some struggling picks like Pyke and Jax are being buffed. Keep in mind, not every change will make it to live servers, however, 99% of them usually do. Who's escaped the nerf bat for yet another patch? After watching through the changes, let us know who you think is still in need of a nerf down in the comments below. To stay up to date and be the first to learn of the new meta trends for every single patch, don't forget to subscribe and turn on those notifications if you haven't already. And with that being said, let's get right into it. Starting off with the item changes. First, we have some big buffs to Black Cleaver. The cost will be reduced from 3,300 down to 3,100. Health will be increased from 300 to 400, and then the passive will be changed from dealing 5% missing health damage on carved enemies to granting 5 movement speed per stack of carve when damaging an enemy. This now introduces on-hit move speed back into Black Cleaver, which will be a nice change for a lot of its users. Next up, the cost of Maw has straight up been reduced by 300 gold, going from 3,100 down to 2,800. A nice indirect buff to AD champions when in AP burst lanes or against heavy AP compositions. One of the more niche lethality items in Serpent's Fang will see a mini rework to its passive. Instead of dealing bonus physical damage against shielded targets, you'll now reduce any shields the enemy gains by 50% for 3 seconds after damaging them. If the target you're attacking is already shielded, then you reduce that shield by 50%. This shield busting is only 25% instead of 50% for its ranged users. These changes definitely give Serpents more consistent strength and will turn the item into an optimal pickup a little more often. The dash distance on Stridebreaker's active will be increased from 200 up to 300. To compensate though, the slow will be reduced from 60 down to 40% and the damage from 100 down to 75% total AD. All in all, these changes won't hurt the item very much, and bruiser picks will still see lots of success rushing it. Muramana will receive an adjustment to its shock passive damage. The damage will be changed from attacks and abilities dealing 2.5% max mana damage to now attacks dealing 1.5% max mana damage, and then abilities will deal 3.5% for melee and 2.7% for ranged, plus 6% total AD max mana damage. Overall, autos will hurt less and abilities much more. Making our way onto the champion buffs now. First, we got some changes for Pyke. Pyke's passive gray health storage will be changed from 25 scaling to 50% to now 10% plus 25% lethality, increased to 35% plus 50% lethality when 2 or more enemies are nearby. This in turn helps buff support Pyke, but will leave solo lane Pyke a little weaker. Kog'maw will receive a pretty simple buff to her Q, as it will be reduced from 9 scaling to 7 seconds down to 8 scaling to 6 seconds. This change just gives her a lot more consistent bully threat throughout the early game. The Troll King sees a very similar change as Trundle's Q cooldown will be reduced from 4 down to 3.5 seconds. 0.5 seconds off of a 4-second cooldown is nothing to scoff at, but likely won't be enough to shift Trundle's power level. Master Yi will have his on-hit damage from E increased from 18 scaling to 50 up to 20 scaling to 60. Another pretty small change that won't see a major effect for Yi. Sejuani's W2 damage will be buffed going from 5.25 up to 6% max HP damage. Sejuani has been in a pretty mediocre spot for a while, so a change like this could finally lead to her seeing some more viability. Jax will have his base AD increased from 3.38 up to 4.25, which if we do the math is an extra 0.87 AD per level. Not a bad buff by any means, but also not something that will propel Jax very far up the tier list. Kog will receive a little more tank shredding power as his W% max HP on hit magic damage will be increased from 3 scaling to 6% up to 3 scaling to 7%. Despite his super low play rate, Kog actually doesn't perform as bad in solo queue as his play rate may suggest. He's been hovering right around that 50% mark the past while now, so a small buff like this may be enough for people to realize he still exists. Interestingly enough, Qiyana will actually be buffed for 11.5. W on hit damage will be increased from 8 scaling to 40 up to 8 scaling to 64. W move speed is going from 5 scaling to 10% up to 5 scaling to 13%. And the third change is to her ultimate damage, increased from 100 scaling to 240 up to 100 scaling to 300. These changes are just what Qiyana needs to help her break back into the meta for 11.5. So Samira was kinda gutted by those nerfs last patch, and of course, Riot will be buffing her back up immediately. AD per level will be increased from 2.3 up to 3, and then her Q damage ratio will be buffed from 80 scaling to 110% up to 80 scaling to 120% total AD. Overall, not too crazy, and Samira will continue to remain a below average ADC for 11.5. Some much-awaited nerfs to Seraphine will go live in 11.5, as her passive ally note damage will be decreased from 100 down to 25%. On top of this, Seraphine's passive note decay has been removed, and her ultimate cooldown is being lowered from 160 scaling to 120 up to 180 scaling to 120. Finally, her passive note damage will be increased from 4 scaling to 16 based on level to now 4, 8, 14, and 24 at levels 1, 6, 11, and 16. All these changes combined should finally be enough to see Seraphine slide out of OP tier. Udyr will receive some much needed nerfs as well, with his health per level being lowered from 99 down to 92, and his R total aura damage decreased from 50 scaling to 275 down to 40 scaling to 240. While these changes should be enough to drop Udyr out of OP tier, he won't be falling very far at all. Rammus will be receiving a health per level nerf too, going from 95 down to 80. This is actually somewhat substantial, as Rammus will be losing a ruby crystal or 400 gold worth of HP at level 10. A few nerfs to Shaco support are in order, as his W AoE damage will be lowered from 15 scaling to 35 down to 10 scaling to 30. W single target damage is being lowered as well, going from 35 scaling to 95 down to 25 scaling to 85. To make sure Jungle Shaco doesn't feel the effects of these nerfs as much, W will now deal an additional 10 scaling to 50 damage to monsters. We've had Rell in our OP tier the last few patches now, so it's not much of a surprise to see her nerfed. Base armor is taking a hit, going from 35 down to 32. W cooldown will be increased from 11 up to 13 seconds. Pretty fair nerfs overall, and we still expect Rell to remain a top tier support. Oddly enough, Azir is actually receiving a nerf for 11.5. These are obviously targeted towards pro play, since solo queue Azir is in a pretty bad state as it is. W's soldier auto damage will be lowered from 60 scaling to 160 down to 50 scaling to 150. All we can say is stay away from Azir in solo queue. A nerf to drop top lane Gragas' bully power down is in order, as his Q's mana cost will be increased from 60 scaling to 80 all the way up to 80 flat. Senna's interaction with Rageblade is being nerfed. First off, she will no longer be able to achieve over 100% crit from her passive. Any excess crit will still be converted to lifesteal though. Rageblade's crit to on-hit conversion is now capped at 100%, and the on-hit damage is now affected by champion crit damage modifiers. These changes will definitely remove a lot of the strength behind the Rageblade build, and we may see a new setup evolve as a result for 11.5. And lastly guys, the final change is what Riot is calling a shift in power from AP to AD on Twitch. Twitch's passive AP ratio will be lowered from 3 down to 2.5%, but to compensate, his ultimate will receive 2 different buffs. The AD will get a lift, going from 25 scaling to 55 up to 30 scaling to 60, and the ultimate duration will be increased from 5 to 6 seconds. Alright, that is what we're looking at heading into patch 11.5, which should be scheduled to drop on the 3rd of March. So are there any champions you guys think got away with being untouched for this upcoming patch? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, don't forget to drop a sub and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on any of our future uploads. Thanks for watching everyone, and we will see you in the next one.